So lovely to be here. Thank you, Sabin, for
Thank
having
you,
us over
Nirmala.
here and for this excellent festival. So well put together and curated with so much heart and love. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, on that note of so much heart and so much love, we have with us Sabin Iqbal, who is what he is. I mean, so hearty, so full of life and love, and comes across as a very deep person who has also a very deep connection with the feminine side of him, which is also considered a very a writer's tool, because since time immemorial it was known that women write with a heart, and tell the kind of stories in poetic prose the way Sabin has been doing. So, Sabin, could you talk a bit about, and this is also very, in Shamal Days you can actually see this side of Sabin as with his other works, but we'll start with Shamal Days first, which is so beautifully set, and it takes off from the perspective of this woman, right? And so, Sabin, yeah, take us a little bit into Shamal Days, and you could probably begin with the reading, and then we could, go further.
Thank you, Nirmala, for pointing out the feminine part in me. As a writer, I always try to get under the skin of my characters, and I think I'm a feminist in that sense of the word, because I grew up in a family where with my mom, mother, and my sister. She's here, and we have a lovely bonding. So I've seen their loneliness, their you know the the, the the life they have. So perhaps that has given me the conditioning to get or to understand women better. The um, the 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 hormonal changes in their behavior, or perhaps I can. This is the book is also about loneliness, the loneliness of a women in a particular place where I come from, which is Varkala, which is a Gulf pocket where most of the men work in the Gulf and women are back home. And I've seen the loneliness of my mother. She was mostly. My father worked in the Gulf for long years, and so that's one. And then I got married, and my wife fell sick for the last 18 years. She's sort of recovering from a very very severe stroke. So her frustrations, her loneliness. I also try to understand her in a way. Her temper, swings, and that rage and silence, the life between this rage and the silence, and we are helpless. And there is a daughter who is growing up to be a cricketer, a teenager, and I said I'll support. What else can I do? These are my cousin is there. I know her life. So these are the women in my life. I'm very, closely knit family. So I observe. I try to understand them. I don't know whether they try to understand me. I have no idea. But then this is what that. I think that as a writer, as you are a writer, Nirmala, I know, and we all observe. We live by our heart, not with our head. If we live by our head, we will not be writers. So we're a little bit of, as we say, in here. So that's what we are. And about Shamal Days, it is completely set in the Middle East. It's an unnamed country in the Middle East, but everyone knows the country I'm talking about. Once a journalist put it, the thinly veiled.
Camouflages.
Yeah. So this there is a political background to this novel, the tension in the Middle East, Palestine-Israel issue. So let me start with the opening sentence, the chapter. Then it was a Friday of violent street protest and shelling in Gaza. And Al Jazeera aired another tape of threats from the Taliban. Though Abbas signed off on the edition calmly, despite tension brewing within, he noticed that his fingers were shaking. All was not well. See, the protagonist is an editor of a newspaper. Okay, so he is sitting in the newspaper office, but there is tension is far away in Gaza. But in a newsroom in the Middle East, we all feel the tension because I worked in the newsroom. We know that at the end of the day, the death toll, what is the score today, how many died, so it's become, so that is a typical Middle East newsroom, so yeah. He had gone through the wire copies with seasoned care and read through the lead story, cobbled together using details from different agencies, rewritten the lead headline and checked the edits. He knew that the troubles in Gaza and the threat of Taliban were far off, but there was something intimate under his own skin that was beginning to crumble. Something was coming apart. Some peace was being disturbed. It was a strange contrary. It was not that he no longer had any reasons to live. On the contrary, he had discovered one. Looking at the trembling figures for a brief moment, he thought of himself as a suicide bomber who, with explosives strapped to his body, experienced a sudden urge to live. Earlier in that day, a pregnant woman in a final trimester wearing a black abaya had walked into a crowded marketplace in Haifa and blown herself up. Along with her and the baby in her womb, 12 men, 5 women, and 4 of them American tourists were shredded into unrecognizable pieces of burnt flesh. Fatima, the woman who considered political issues more serious and precious than the promise of the baby in her womb, was a tall, complexioned woman with fine features. A suicide note, a video clip, was also sent to Al Jazeera and was shown along the horrifying visuals of thick, grey smoke hemmed in by deep orange flames. This is my revenge against the Zionists. This is my statement that we will not compromise an inch of our soil. The Jews are out of Palestine. This is the beginning.
Yeah. How, such powerful prose, and with the poetics of emotion, if I may say so. And also, the sensitive dealing of this woman who's blown herself up. You've treated her not just as a statistic or as some distant figure in a distant land where you're not too close to, and yet close to. You bring her alive in ways that only somebody who's touched base with the feminine can. So who was this woman? Was it a real character? Did she inspire you from one of the stories that you were reporting?
Yeah, because one day in a newsroom we saw a ticker coming and there is a bomb blast in Haifa. And I found out, when we read, I looked for stories, so I found out it's a pregnant woman who blew herself, So then I thought, why? And there's a baby inside, and every pregnant woman, at least in our conditioning, think of the baby and the baby inside. But she preferred her political reasons. She put it, the priority was about the baby, and she became, she blew herself for what she believed in, so. Yeah.
For people like us who are sitting, especially in Western nations or even in India, where women are a little more emancipated than, say, those who are counterparts in the Middle East or Afghanistan, and then now you hear of all these stories of women chopping off their hair and going up against the political system. So, what is your observation of the feminine in the Middle Eastern region? Behind that black robe they wear, who do you see? What is there in that flesh and blood?
Yeah, there is a character called Mrs. Abdullah in the novel. It's a small character, but very, very powerful character in a way, because the Abdullah is a local Arab, and the Abbas, the protagonist, and his cousin stay with, as a tenants in his flat, and Mrs. Abdullah comes there once in a while, because the children live with, they're separated, Abdullah and Mrs. Abdullah separated. And this woman comes there once in a while. And Abdullah is a womanizer. He brings home, girls every weekend and all that. So on Thursday nights when, this woman comes there, to be very frank, when I was a bachelor living in a, and I've seen this, and this is character out of what I've seen. This woman will come and she will, like a sillage of fragrance around her, is very, perfumed and, in stylistic robes and all that. She comes in with. One day, this really happened, and I've written it in the book. I happened to be in that lift in the midnight, and she took off her veil, and I couldn't. Wow, stunning beauty! I can't say. She smiled at me and all that, So this is one aspect of an Arab woman we see, and I think I presume that below this black robe they wear jeans and t-shirt and all that. So there's the two layers of living and two layers of aspirations, two layers of conditioning and culture. So they're very aspirational women. Especially this normally set in the late 90s and the 2000s, but things have changed now. You recently had been to Dubai. You've seen for yourself.
Yeah, a lot of people, black veils and tennis shoes, and then you can see jeans popping there, and then very driving a big sedan and parking it in a parking lot, and then speaking very well and presenting themselves so well. So there's a strong woman beneath that, and it's so beautiful that you've picked on from that strength from way back in the 90s, because that's when you were in working in the Middle East. So could you talk a bit about your tenure as a journalist over there, and the kind of work that you did and your influences in creating Shamal Days?
Yeah, I started my career in a huge construction company. From there, I moved on to a newsroom, and I landed in a newsroom full of different nationalities. My editor was British. My colleagues were Welsh and Scottish, and they were African. Mostly Sudanese and Somalis. There were Russians. There were Filipinos. There were, all kind of Indians. From Malayalis to Kannadigas to Tamils, from northern, Delhi and all that. So it's a mix of, it's a cultural potpourri for us. And for a boy who comes from in a village from Kerala, never worked in any metro, landing there in that newsroom, and I couldn't understand what they were telling me, all this Welsh and Scottish accent, and I had no idea. It's a very cultural shock for me. But I have to survive, I have this aspiration within me, that I want to be a journalist. I called my editor, sir, and he called me, come inside. He took me to his room, and he closed the door. His name is Peter Hellier. He said, say, Sabin, young man, there is no sir business here. You call me Peter. He was 70 or 60 plus. And me, in my mid-20s and all that, to call him Peter, it's like we can't think about that in this. So, but that's a cultural thing. Then you come back, if we call people by name here, they get offended, So
colonial hangover.
Yeah, colonial hangover. So that's, and then working with all these people opened an entire world before me, different cultures and, trying to understand. We used to have African friends, we go out with them. So their life, their problems, they're fighting Sudanese, so the North and South Sudan conflict. I have friends from South Sudan. They were fighting for Juba, the South Sudan. So lovely friends, their problem, we discuss that. And then have Bangladesh friends from Bangladesh. It's all kind of friends, and open a whole world of political situations before me. That was a huge learning curve. And I also started to improve my writing. I was under a news editor, brilliant, and he picked word by word and says, why did he use this? Okay, you tell me, why did you use this, Sabin? Then I started to think, and I started to ask questions to my my sentences. Why? Once I used the word, it was a great shot. By the way, I reported sports. He said, it was a great shot. It took me inside. I said, you know the meaning of great? I said, yes, you say a good shot, but greatness, you achieve greatness over a period of time. But then when I see in words have begun to lose their meaning, we just use it without fully understanding the meaning of the words. That is very sad. But as writers, we take care of the words.
Yes, yes.
When I never use now, it's a great shot because I remember what he said. Greatness, we can't use that so lightly.
Yeah. It's like we had an English teacher in Sacred Hearts in Bangalore, and she'd say, never use the word nice. Only people who have nothing else to say nice.
Nice.
So it's like that. So, but we were fortunate to have grown up at a time when we had these mentors, who actually took care. And there were also people in the know. They knew what they were talking about. And it's fantastic to know that you've been mentored by such lovely people who've actually shown you the path. But as a journalist itself, because in this, there's a lot of the journalist in you in Shamal Days who's telling the story. So there's a thin line, of course, when a journalist or when anybody writes a novel, there's so much taking from real life, which we then transpose. We make up the name of a city or a place, you could kind of make a wild guess, but then, so that way. So could you talk about, those aspects, about being a journalist who's recreated the story and also the setting and the characters. You could also use some small excerpts to elucidate this point. Yeah. Thanks.
The country that I lived in was a country of expatriates. When I lived there, we used to go to the Corniche and, I used to watch these people and wonder their stories. These people are walking on the Corniche. They all have their own story, their own stories of struggle, their own stories of how they ended up, why they came and to a land of fortunes, and what are they aspiring for? What would be their stories back home, the family, the issues, the money they have borrowed to come to this land. So I used to keep looking at them. Perhaps it reflected. I never knew that this, I'd be storing those thoughts for a novel. But this is what it is, and this is. Now, by the Corniche, they leaned against the stone benches and relived the days of hardship when they found shelter in the sheds thatched with the dry fronds of date palms, sleeping shirtless through sultry, baking summer nights, wrapped in cheap blankets during the bone-freezing winter nights, looking at gentle sea with many weathered storms tucked inside them. They remembered how the small country had evolved and developed right in front of their own sunburned eyes, and how most of them remained trapped in peculiar circumstances. They heaved long, heavy sighs. They were warm yet unfamiliar, like siesta gusts or the Shamal, whirling in from the desert, spraying tiny, shiny powder of sand. No matter how many years they lived in the country, slogging it out in the sun, killing themselves day by day, estranging themselves from their own backyards and bedrooms back home, they would never become a part of the country. They would always remain expatriates, the second-class, dispensable residents. They could be asked to go back home any time, deported unceremoniously, dumb without regret like leftover waste from the previous night's feast. Worse, after many summers, their sons follow their footsteps. Years later, shadows of the fathers and sons emerge under an inescapable scorching sun.
How beautiful is that? And also, that gives us an idea how the title of the book came, Shamal Days. So could you talk about the Shamal winds?
Shamal is a seasonal Middle Eastern wind. It comes with, let's say, bad omen for some. It comes with bad omen, it comes with fortune for some, but it also comes with sickness, change of weather, we fall sick, so that it's a northwesterly desert wind. So then I thought of this, the initial title of the book was not this, And I was wondering what to, then one fine day when I was in the shower, then water fell on me. I said, well, let's call it Shamal Days, So that's how it, because Shamal is also about that desert, and also an expatriate living in the desert country. His days are the Shamal Days.
It's beautiful because it takes me back to one of Ruskin Bond's titles, One Night in Shamli, So these things actually ring, they just resonate because there is this place or this wind or something specific that's kind of talking to you, and that's quite a lovely title, I must say. But also, going a little back, you were talking about how being a journalist in the Middle East, you came in touch with many people who had come from different countries, different places, because of the difficulties they had. Many had borrowed money, to be there, and they didn't know when they'll be deported. So how did you land up there, and was it a difficult journey from here to the Middle East? And
No, Nirmala, as I told you, I come from a small town on the border between Trivandrum and Kollam. It's called Varkala. It's a tourist place, and more than the tourist place, it's also a Gulf pocket where almost every house has at least one or two of their family members living in the Gulf. For us, it's a natural extension. Now, after finishing my journalism course, I went to Delhi because I wanted to become a big, a big journalist, but I couldn't cope with the culture, the struggle. I came back before my money ran out. I had some money. I sold my bike, and with that money I went to Delhi to become a journalist. But then I had to come back, and after when my brother-in-law took me to the Gulf and I landed there, I found at home, myself at home. I found this is she said, living in the Gulf, in a Gulf country for a Malayali is a kind of a second home. We feel much at home than being in Delhi.
Absolutely. I got away with talking in Tamil. I mean, I spent 1 month in Dubai and got away with talking in Tamil with all the Malayalis,
Oh, yeah.
and they understood me. Yeah. So, so from there, could you kind of take us to the setting? The whole place, the city that you have created, which is not. You were in Dubai, I guess. So you've created.
No, I lived all
over the
Emirates.
Yeah, all over the Emirates. Okay. So and yet you've created another. Entity for a place. So that again is a camouflage. So could you talk about that place?
Yeah. You want to read, or
you could read and also talk about it, whichever way.
The landscape was different. Now it is not the city that you've just seen. It was much different, and the capital city was different. There's no Louvre there. It's all about. They were like building all of them, so it's different. And when I used to travel from Abu Dhabi to Dubai and Sharjah and further north, we used to take sharing taxis, and we sit with I don't want, if I take a name that would be racist, but then the taxi drivers especially come from a particular community, and the way they dress, they live actually in the cab. They don't, they only go to use a common washroom, come back and live. So these kind of, I've used, it's there in the book, so if I take the name, then it's on record, and I don't want to sound racist, but these are observations we make as writers, and the colleagues that we used to have, Arab colleagues, African colleagues, Asian colleagues. It's very interesting, and Pakistani, journalists, and from Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. So the journalists from Delhi used to gel more with the Pakistani journalists because their culture is more or less the same than with the South Indian. We like Tamilians and Kannadigas and Malayalis. We go to the canteen together, and they go to the canteen together. Because there's nothing wrong with it, but that's the way it is. So then we realize that this partition is actually, it's a whole, the one country, when it is divided, and people are still finding each other's culture similar and all that. So this is what is happening inside the newsroom. And interestingly, there's another group which is the the British and the, those from, they go together and they have their own politics to discuss and all that, So most of our page makers were, from Pakistan. So we, the sub-editors, would make some, corrections. These senior Pakistani page makers, which was difficult for them to, really, this kind of, and especially when India and Pakistan are playing in Sharjah, there is more tension in the newsroom than on the ground. We like good bunch of Pakistani journalists and we are Indians and we are rooting for each other and all. So fun. But that is where I understood the cultural, differences and the importance of, understanding each other's culture, and, that made me, it's easy for me to, understand a person, the differences, and, so.
I think it's also, the location is such a melting pot, I mean, at least over here. So when I went on the desert safari, there was this Pakistani driver saying, "Madam, आप yoga करती है, मुझे भी सिखा दो ना, पेट है मेरा." So it's damn cute. And then also they come home for lunch to my cousin's place, they're gardeners and stuff like that. So it's such a beautiful, only here in India we are bashing up our neighboring countries, but everywhere else we are living in unity. And that's what is so beautiful. And talking of that, take us a bit to, Cliffhangers, again your earlier novel, where you are talking about this whole, cultural divide, religious divide, and the characters who made that book happen, because it's so integral to your storytelling. It's and there's also this deeper voice which I kind of read into, which says, let us call for some integration, some peaceful living. And
if Shamal Days is about people of different nationalities living together or trying to live together or fighting or all that, the cliffhangers were within India, in a state within India, and especially it's from, as the title shows, it's from the cliff at Varkala. So it's about 4 boys living on the cliff, or the village surrounding the cliff. Their identity issues. They 4 boys carrying Muslim names. They're caught between two communities. They're ready to fight. There's a sentence in that the peace is like papadum. It's so fragile. It can be crushed any with a slight,
Such a beautiful metaphor.
Yeah.
Peace is like pappadam. That should be your next title.
Yeah. So it also from my heart, because I live that life. I know all these boys, in the cliff, how they live. These boys are funny because they carry Muslim names, but there is no haram for them, anything. They drink, they have, they go to the parties. So for the Muslims, they are kafir. For the other, the right-wing Hindu group, they are the agents of the enemy. So what these poor boys are caught in between, their identity is a question. They are circumcised. They can't redo that. You can't just press a redo and go back to normal. It is done forever. The novel ends with that thought of the protagonist. Musa is telling the story. He said, I can't do anything. We can't do anything. We have to live with the indelible mark of the loss of a foreskin. So how do we do? We can't fit a foreskin back into the genital thing. So whether, I still remember, I don't know whether you've seen Mr. and Mrs. is a movie. In that is a bus. Mr. and Mrs. Aya. Yeah, in that there is a scene where they come, they attack, they're looking for Muslims to attack, and a person shows an old couple, said, they are. Yeah. Then finally they were killed. Then asked, why did you do that? He said, I'm a Jew. Then you understand, Jews also circumcised. Exactly. So they're looking for people who are circumcised to single out and kill. This is the world we live in. So when your identity is in question, that Cliffhangers is a very simple novel. It can be read in a few hours, I think. One of the very popular person who reads a lot calls me one day and said, Sabin, I just finished the cliffhangers, and I want to tell you this. I said, what, sir? More than everything else, the readability. I took a flight from Trivandrum, and by the time I reached Delhi, I had completed the novel. I thought that was, as writers, we want to be like that, simple writing, from the heart.
Absolutely. So talking of your writing, you've been, so what was the journey like moving from writing 500 and 800 word articles to churning out 80,000 words for a book? As a journalist, I've had that journey too, but what was yours?
Nirmala, mine is like, I grew up in a, I studied in a very, very run-down government Malayalam medium AP school. We never, but my parents, like teachers, and I come from a family of, very educated and all that. But then I went to a school where there is no, the English was pathetic, with due respect. And I started to speak in English only after going to the Gulf. And, when I was, I had no place to run away from this newsroom. That changed my accent, that changed my, but my ears were open, so I picked that, But for writing, I used to scribble, poems, but to write a prose, I couldn't, It's like, I couldn't write a prose line, Then it was a struggle. Then, when I joined the Indian Express as a, trainee reporter here in Trivandrum, I remember once my news editor, the chief reporter, took my copy and just threw at me and said, "What is this? You were sent to report, not to write a poem." So, man, what am I, See, from there we grow. The important thing is that I was hungry to learn. Then I went to Delhi. There's another incident. When I was in Delhi, I wanted to become a sports reporter. I wanted to write about cricket. Because I wanted to be a cricketer. I could not become a cricketer, so I wanted to be a cricket writer. So I got all the recommendation letters from all the senior journalists from Kerala. And when I landed up in Delhi, and I went to this very, very senior journalist, and with shivering hands and fellowshipping knees, we call it, knees fellowshipping, and I stood there, I said, okay, so what do you want to become? I said, sir, I want to, sports journalism. What's your name? I said, are you Ravi Shastri? I looked at him. Are you Sunil Gavaskar? Oh, are you Dilip Vangsakar? I know what he's going to say. Yeah, yeah. JK is there. So, the point is that these are the people who are writing cricket now, okay? So go back. And then he started to give me a list of cricket, writers, and said, Neville Carter. Have you read Neville Carter? Did you read? I said, no. Go back to Kerala. It was so rude. Come back after 3-4 months, and I'll try to place you somewhere. Nirmala, I was so, broken hearted that night. I still remember somewhere near the Ames, and it was cold. I walked back. I said, no, what to do, And I came back. Once I came back to Trivandrum, I made it a point to read all that is written about cricket in that British library we had here. So that is one, that kick on my butt to do this. Inside, I'm thankful that he did that. Then again, my language-wise, because I, it's the Malayalam medium school and all that, even though my parents used to give me grammar works and all that, but I went to the British Council, picked up all the grammar books, and started to do religiously, start working on my language and writing and all that. So that's one part of building the language. Then writing habit is that, I want to write. That's because of all the personal issues that I've had in my life. Writing was my breathing, was my breath in a way. If I didn't write, I couldn't survive. Writing is how I survived. All the chaos and all the tragedy is around my life. I found some space, some time to write, to live, to survive.
Amazing.
I don't know the merit of what I wrote or still writing, but writing for me is that.
Yeah, it's brilliant, and you hear of such resilient stories from the land of Kerala, because people from here go all over the world, and be it nursing or any profession that you take on, there's so much effort, and people actually look forward to that, and that shows because you have chosen to master a tongue that you did not grow up with, but then you came back and put in all that effort as an adult, which is a very difficult thing to do. And then expanding those 800 words to 80,000 words. So when do you write and how does it happen?
There's
because it's a
funny
very
the
busy
funny thing,
life. Yeah.
funny thing about the cliffhangers is that when I was in Doha, I was living with my cousin. He took me out. We were in a mall, and he said, "You be here." He went for something. I was sitting in that sofa like this, and then there's a thought came to me. There is a sentence. That day, the balloon went up far too high. We all carry notebooks and all that. So I just wrote that line out, down, and see, that book grew out of that sentence. Then I knew that there's a story of 4 boys. And interestingly, that line is not in the book. So the book grew out of that line. And then in the process of writing, Nirmala, I saw characters appearing before me. I don't know how your experience is. I just want to ask you. And I am just a typewriter, sitting there and typing. I can see Musa's mother is a very powerful character in the book. She's always angry. I don't know why she's angry, but she appeared before me as an angry woman, and just wrote like that. She's always angry. Maybe because her husband lived for 40 years in the Gulf. And maybe all those unaddressed emotions are coming out in the form of, or getting manifested in the form of anger. I don't know. I'm leaving that to the readers to judge. But she appeared before me like that. So this was my writing process. I used to write at the cafes. I used to write. I would just want to write. The story was filling in my heart. I just want to write it out. That was the. But this was a more studied. Maybe a difficult book to read. Many of those cliffhangers readers won't, like this much, because this talks about life in a different, environment, and about loneliness, about that character study and all that. So.
No, as writers we also grow. So the first book is always an emotional outburst, and then the second one, you've been there, you've heard feedback and all that, and then you're kind of trying to straddle a different step. But it's good. I mean, it's beautiful. It's still got your basic, character, which is a lot of poetry in that simple prose, and that is very. That's what actually shines through. How much time do we have? Sorry.
We have 15 more minutes. 15
more minutes. So. Do you want to open it for questions, or should we have 1 or 2 more questions?
No, I think you can.
I can continue? Yeah. Okay, yeah, I'm not too sure about the timing. Okay, yeah. So great. All right. So, and you were talking about how Shamal Days is getting translated into other international languages. Secret, let's ask.
No, that's a breaking news I got last night in a party that we all had. We were there, the Polish team, there is a Polish team who come from Polish university. They just took me and said that, I said, we want something, a gift for you. So I thought they must have bought something from Poland. Then they said, that the director of the university came and said, we have, as a present for you. I said, what? We are translating your Shamal Days into Polish. That is something. And then another surprise, the Manipal University, the head of languages, said, we are doing it into French. Wow. I said, so it was a double surprise for me. For a writer, that when your novel crosses the border, and that's a best gift, for me. Yeah.
Congrats, Sabin, and we hope it does really, really well. Has it been translated into Malayalam yet?
No, the Cliffhangers.
Cliffhangers, yes.
Published by Mathrubhumi. This is being translated at the moment.
Okay, fantastic. And and you also have other works 2 other completed works. Secret. So let's ask him about that.
Yeah, I just completed, 2 more novels. One is set in Trivandrum, particularly in the city of Trivandrum. It's called A Calamitous Afternoon, where a cyclone hits the city. 5 more things happen in the city, and it's the story of that afternoon. Everything, those 5 things, culminates in that calamitous afternoon. It's a very small, it's 70,000 words.
70,000 is not small.
No, the other one is 125. So the second novel is finally Father Died. That's a very rustic novel set in my the childhood village, my mother's village. So backwater village. Very rustic, very put downable novel, very slow paced and all that. So yeah, I finished. After the festival, I'll give the final touches and send to the publishers. Yeah.
Fantastic. So when do you find time to do this, and at what part of the day, and where do you do all your writing and editing these days?
No, Nirmala, most of the time I am jobless, so I have time to. But I write during the day and early morning. So.
Early morning, is it?
Early
Okay.
morning, yeah.
Nice. Okay.
I'm an early sleeper, and
Oh.
I get up early. And
Okay. Lovely. And how many hours of work do you put in every day?
at least 2 to 3 hours. But I have a sort of a target of writing 1,500 to 2,000 words a day. Yeah. So I mean, just write. I don't look at. I don't edit during my writing. Just finish those 1,500 words. Then leave it at the end of the day or next day. Come back and read, and then if it is not good, get away. But writing, I don't wait for the moment to the muse to land on me and inspire me to write. I know I have to write. Exactly. This is my way of emptying myself out, taking all the tears I don't show anyone. This is my process of cathartic. What you call the catharsis in my life is my writing. I have to write whether get published or not. Nirmala, I got so much rejections. I finally I thought I will be an unpublished writer. I was happy with that. I was Then came the breakthrough. Then Aleph picked up, and especially David picked up the manuscript and opened now 2 novels. Then Harper. So that is easy for the journey as a writer to break into that.
It's a very difficult journey. But if you're a journalist, you kind of detach yourself from all of that and say, I'm just going to write. I don't care what happens. But then we all go through that. So unless you're a celebrity or a film star, nobody is going to pick up your book so easily, even if your writing shines.
Yeah.
But have you ever chosen to write in Malayalam? Because
I will be writing, and I know that I will be writing a novel, at least a novel in Malayalam, because I write Malayalam articles now, so in mainstream newspaper and magazines, especially Mathrubhumi and all that. So I know they like you write so beautifully. I said, yeah, Malayalam is my mother tongue. I write in Malayalam. So I decided I'm looking for a plot, looking for something to come into me to write in Malayalam, but I will.
Fantastic. So finally, tell us about this whole journey, from cliffhangers up until your 4th book. So how has that whole progression been, as a novelist, what has your journey been?
No, see, the Cliffhangers is not the first novel I wrote. Actually, Finally Father Died, which is yet to come out, is the first manuscript I started working on. It's now 15 to 20 years ago, but the novel has changed, as you know. It's gone through different drafts and different shapes, and story gets changed and all that. But Cliffhangers just happened, and this has been there within me. I knew that I had to write this, so I was at the same time I was working on this also. But the Calamitous Afternoon is a new one. So it's a new book, new thing. The other has been there. I've been carrying that manuscript and draft and all that.